The home stretch. I'm going to take this class to the home stretch. We are at week 8. Class will close up at the end of tonight. And then after that, students, it's all yours. You're going to be doing presentations after Thanksgiving. So I want to thank you, those who attended our field trip on a day, Saturday, in which we were so lucky. We didn't get any rain. It was after the atmospheric river craziness. And we had really good weather. We had a good showing of students from this year as well as last year. So I invited students from last year's cohort to join. So it's actually a great 50-50 split of folks. And we had a really good, a great time. I hope so. I hope you all enjoyed it. We had some really awesome macaroons from Corinne that started the field trip, and then our meet at Starbucks, and then our walk along 82nd Avenue started on Holgate, and then midway through we met with our House Representative Confam at 82nd Division and talked about the J District and 82nd Avenue. And then we ended with a meal. So I wanted to thank those who showed up. It was quite an undertaking. It was fun. It was really great to meet most of you in person. I also have yet to meet a handful of others of my students from last year and this year. So I wanted to say thank you again for being here, riding it through the end of class. And tonight we are going to close up this class essentially to talk about what are our visions for the future. And while we do that, it's really important to honor our past. And with us today, I have Winta Yohannes, our Executive Director of Albina Vision. Joined with Winta is Michael Alexander on the board of Albina Vision Trust. And shortly after Winta's presentation, I've also invited a colleague of mine, a friend of mine with ODOT, Robin Wilcox. She is the Public and Active Transportation Policy Analyst at ODOT for statewide. And after Robin's talk, we will break. And after that, we'll do a panel Q&A. So there were a couple homeworks that came through for this class, and first was to present some of the questions that you would like to have our speaker Winta from Albina Vision Trust go into detail and talk a little bit more. I think a big part of her presentation and a discussion with Michael will also bring upon some of the questions that you've asked. So hopefully they'll get addressed in the presentation. And a big part of this will be opened up to the Q&A. The other part of the homework was essentially to answer a question that was posed by Robin. And as you remember, the question was, what does a statewide transportation network that prioritizes the need of people walking, biking, and taking public transportation look like? So thank you all for your responses, your questions, as well as your responses. It shows quite a wide range of passion among the cohort for this year. So I'm really, really honored to have you in this class to allow me to lead you through this course, this one-on-one transportation planning course for our folks in the community. And I wanted to maybe perhaps open up another 5 minutes or so if folks want to go off mute and just offer a word or two of reflection from the field trip class thus far, and just so that our guest speakers can also get a feel of the energy in this course. Could you, let's take the splash page off so we can see each other. Yeah, there we go. Wow, it's so nice to meet most of you in person, and now we're back on Zoom. It's kind of crazy. Hello. Well, feel free to comment and what you'd like in the chat. But if no further ado, what we'll do is get started with our presentation for tonight. We have a jam-packed night and a lot to talk about. So Winta, I would like to hand it over to you and to Michael. Very nice to have you both.
Thank you so much, Twee, and good evening, everyone. I was telling Twee I've been meaning to take this class for 3 years, and so I'm glad to finally make it in this space one way or another. You know, by way of introduction, I'll say that the Albina Vision team, one of the things that have made us successful is bringing people who have a diverse range of skill sets. I want to let you know that tonight we've brought the social scientists and social workers to inform this conversation about transportation. But I think it's really important as we think about how to ground our vision into the actions that we take today. So while I always say that the worst part of my job is following anything that Mike ever has to say, I'll start by kicking it off to him to give us a little bit of an overview on Albina Vision and touch on some of the questions about I-5. And then I'll do a presentation on the community investment plan, and that will take us well into our presentation portion. So take it away, Mike.
Is there a possibility of sharing your screen with me for a second? I wanted to see.
Michael, do you want to share screen? Nanda, can you make Michael a co-host?
Yeah, I just made you a co-host, so you should be able to share.
Okay. Let's see if my ambition. Are you able to see this?
No.
No.
No. Okay. Not sure what's happening. But in any event, I'll go work without it. First of all, thank you very much for the invitation to be with you tonight. And in some way, it's kind of a homecoming for me. I had the privilege of serving as the interim vice president for global diversity and inclusion at PSU for about 1.5 years. I retired a little more than a year ago, and was delighted to see Dr. Lambert come into that role, and she has done tremendous work in a relatively short period. But I have tremendous familiarity with the institution and, quite frankly, the challenges and opportunities that it brings to the city to continue to evolve into the type of community that we all want to be a part of. I've been associated with the Albina Vision Trust since 2015, and that work began with a group of individuals, about 24 folks, who got together to just imagine what the reinvention or the reimagination of the rose-quartered community would look like. For those of you who are familiar with the history of Lower Albina, you know that it is reflective of communities around the country who have seen the basis for life in African-American communities destroyed and disrupted around eminent domain, around transportation policies, around disinvestment. And Albina, which had served as the historical base and the historical home for the African-American population here, had undergone decades of disruption and intentional disinvestment. And a group of us got together to say, you know, we know that this community is going to undergo evolution, and we can either witness it or we can influence it. And we chose to influence it. And the vision was the effort to step back and to say, what could this community look like if we were driven by the work of communities of color and communities of conscience in creating a space which was reflective of what we aspire to be as a city and as a region. And so AVT began with the belief that if we can be honest and transparent in building, then we can create a space that is much more reflective of where we want to be 50 years from now than where we were 50 years ago. The African-American community in Portland has been characterized by a significant amount of targeted and intentional displacement and disruption. that has caused us to sit back and ask the question of how do we bring legitimate restorative justice economically, educationally, from healthcare perspectives, from housing, from home ownership, into a space that is reflective of how we want to live, work, and play. And so that is our vision. We've done that in collaboration with a number of partners, but it's been done with the belief that in order to be honest in building a future, we need to be just as honest in acknowledging the past, the healing that needs to take place, to acknowledge the intentional disruption, to acknowledge who was most impacted by that, and to begin to say, while it may not be the fault of anyone who is sitting in positions of power today, it is the responsibility of everyone who has the opportunity and the scope to create a new space. Our vision is a 50-year vision. It's not something that we envision that will materialize in the next 5 to 10 years. And we're looking at, we look at this through the lens of what I call uninhibited belief. We're not constrained by reality. We're not constrained by not having money. We're not constrained by not being elected. What we are constrained by is a limitation on what we believe the hope for the future can hold for us. And that's what we have tried to build, and that's who we bring to this work. Those are the fellow travelers who are with us on this work. It's important for us to honor our history. It's important for us to create a space that is going to be remarkable and engaging. It's important for us to look at issues like the arts and intergenerational engagement and community engagement. And it's also important for us at times to make sure that we don't make decisions today that make tomorrow impossible. Some of you would be aware of discussions around potentially having Major League Baseball occupy the site that's currently occupied by the Portland Public Schools Administration. I'd love to see Major League Baseball. Not there, though. That's an opportunity for us to look at developing workforce housing and a child-centered environment that allows us to really build community in that space. It's not the highest end use for that potential resource. So for us, we find ourselves, even though we're looking at a 50-year vision, oftentimes engaged in discussion, dialogue, and sometimes some conflictual positioning around issues where if they go forward, they will create barriers to be able to build the future that we want to build. And so one of the items that we are looking at right now is transportation policy and how long-term transportation strategy will impact this geographic area. We are looking very closely at the work of the Department of Transportation and sort of using infrastructure to support some levels of restorative justice, but we are in a wrestling match in some ways with determining what the scope of that needs to be. And I think that discussion is going to be constructive. It is going to be helpful. I think people come to it in what I call violent agreement at times in terms of foundational beliefs, but being able to make sure that the scale and the intent and the participation of community in that is sized and scoped appropriately, I think is going to be a point of ongoing discussion and dialogue for us. We've encountered, I think, the best and the worst of experiences in that dialogue, but we remain committed to making sure that we're making the right decisions in the right way with the right level of involvement of community. And one of the areas that Winta will speak about is a significant amount of activity and work that we've done in a community investment plan, which allows us to lay the foundation for both a master plan and a strategic plan that will allow us to navigate not over years, but over decades. And so I think our discussion tonight is really to help you to think about what the promise of development of this community can look like and what it allows us to do in terms of acknowledging and honoring the traumas that it has created historically and the opportunity that we have to now create a path forward, which is 180 degrees from the path that's behind us. So with that, let me step back because I know we're constrained by some time and we do want to make sure we create space for dialogue and questions, but delighted to be with you. I tell people all the time, this is my home. I've been here 17 years. I absolutely love life here. It's my 7th city and 35 years of professional career of living, and it's #1 by a mile. But one of the things that I do speak to here is I grew up in New York City. I grew up in an area called Bedford-Stuyvesant, which has undergone tremendous gentrification, tremendous. But I have the ability to go back and point to the brownstone that I was raised in and show that to my grandchildren. There are hundreds of families here who cannot do that. If they do that, they're pointing to lane 3 of I-5. They're pointing to the Memorial Coliseum. They're pointing to the expansion of Legacy Emmanuel Hospital. That historical grounding and the joy and pride that comes associated with that, as well as the generational transfer of wealth, has been stripped from this community over decades. So when you begin to see how passionate people are about this work and this opportunity, it's because of outcomes like that. For me, this is history. For many of the people we work with, it's memory. And that is what continues to fuel our focus and our dogged determination to make sure that it's built right the first time and that we don't come back and try to retrofit it 10 years from now. We have the opportunity to build it not only better, but build it right, and to build it right the first time. So let me step back, Ms. Winta. It is your floor.
Thank you, Mike. So as Mike so beautifully helped us frame, and as I know all of you know, transportation is never just about transportation. And in the case of our effort to revive Lower Albina, we look around and see that the physical environment is a direct reflection of how awfully we've treated each other through racist public policies. And so as we move forward, one of the things that became clear was that we had to be able to talk about planning in a way that directly addressed people's pain, as well as people's joy and aspiration for the future. And so the step that we've taken over the last 18 months has been to develop the community investment plan, which took the high level values and framework established by the original visioning process and took it forward to add additional detail and phasing to think about how we do this over the next 50 years. So I will not be able to share the entire body of that work with you tonight, but there are a few important takeaways, especially in terms of how we think about transportation connecting us and how some of these ideas have come out through this kind of planning process. So I will share those lessons and then invite you to engage with us to learn more at another date. So if I could get this presentation up, please. So what you can see here is just a taste for the aesthetic of the workshops and that we've hosted over the last year and a half. And this is important because, you know, what we're really grappling with is the fact that certain segments of our population, specifically the Black community, have not been involved in planning and in the decision-making and the development of this neighborhood. And so we were really intentional about thinking about every detail, including how can the aesthetics of your materials inspire joy and tell people from the beginning that they are welcome and that we're able to blend together historical elements. So the photos that you see are all of real people from Albina, some of whom are still here, with this Afrofuturistic look that says we can't create what was, but this is about how do we launch into the future and dream about what can be. And so next slide, please. You can just see that there has been extensive feedback, all of this during COVID. And that, you know, what that really taught me, at least, is that there's a real hunger for these kinds of venues that allow us to dream beyond what is going on right now, and allows us to put all of the policy battles that are at play in our city into the context of what's possible. And so next slide, please. Next slide. So at a very high level, this is the program that has been developed in terms of how that 94 acres of central city land could be utilized to advance this notion of building a neighborhood that is intentionally designed with the wealth and safety of Black Portlanders at the center. One of the things that we have been really inspired by is the responses to questions when we've asked people not what their transportation or housing needs are, but when we say, what do you need to thrive? What do your children need to thrive? What does it look like to design your ideal island in some instances? And we had kids provide drawings of this for us. We had a number of community workshops where we just talked about memories that inform what is important. And from all of that feedback, this is what we came up with. And there are a few parts of this that I will highlight. One is the idea that Albina will become Portland's front porch on the east side. And so this is intended to be a welcoming place for all Portlanders, but that there is also going to be a balance between this as a destination spot and a place that's curated specifically for the neighborhood residents. And that the driving question for us is always, how does this place create the feeling of belonging, create the feeling of joy, create the kinds of connections that allow us to see our neighbors and have the spontaneous interactions that make up a community. And so in that, one of the important community priorities that came up was actually a close-knit neighborhood that was completely car-free. And this is interesting because it came up in the context of discussions about safety and safety in the broadest sense, safety from surveillance, safety from unwanted police interactions, safety in terms of being able to keep eyes on the neighborhood's children, safety in terms of making sure that elders had a place where they could continue to contribute and get around easily. And so if we could go to the next slide, please. You'll see on the left side where you see the mid-density housing is where we picture that kind of campus style housing and intended again to cultivate that kind of safety and community. The other idea that came up was that there should be schools everywhere. And so what that morphed into is the idea that we needed community gathering spaces through what are the hubs. So in the first phase of development, we really want to see an art hub right on the waterfront that serves as that gathering place for all Portlanders. But then you'll see that the network of hubs would be connected so that there could be one focused on education and entrepreneurship, wellness, food hubs. So you see in the yellow, this network of community gathering spaces for both residents in this 94-acre neighborhood and also for Portlanders coming in. The other outcome of the engagement was that we saw a focus on Broadway as a gateway into Lower Albina and recognition that this is a high crash corridor for all modes. And so thinking about it in terms of how do you cultivate safety And as a core part of the strategy to, again, have that balance of making sure that this is not an instance in which it feels like improvements are done to Black community members in particular, but that it fits into the context of a broader vision where there is both broad inclusion and private space. So next slide, please. Very briefly, because I know there's interest on this topic, I thought it was important to highlight, again, to Mike's point, why the dialogues and advocacy around I-5 have been particularly important. So you can see here the CAP option that is moving forward, the highway cover design option, is critically important because without it, development could happen in Lower Albina, which you see to the left with the green space, but that part of the city would continue to be physically segregated because of the racist decision that segregated it to begin with. And so this is a critical part of the healing, and it restores the urban street grid in an important way so that neighborhood residents are able to be connected back to Northeast Portland in a seamless fashion. And so next slide, please. So to give you another view of some of the amenities, especially that have come up as particularly important in the way that, again, we're thinking about the spectrum of private to public spaces and the ways that then the transportation corridors connect. You can see here in this image, in the purple is the closed campus sort of neighborhood that we talked about, whereas along Broadway is where we envision more commercial development, and that really being the corridor into the district. Though if you can zoom in, you can also see there are a number of features like festival streets, the incorporation of the Green Loop. And with the Green Loop in particular, is important that it be integrated, but again, not serve as a way that the community is being cut through, but that infrastructure was aligned with the public streets so that, again, it didn't feel like a trespassing so much as an integration of a public infrastructure that was otherwise broadly supported. And then you can't see it in this image, but the other important aspect that came up was that throughout this whole neighborhood, there needed to be an Albina neighborhood walkway because the ability to, for pedestrians to safely and easily make it across the neighborhood consistently came up as an important priority. And then finally, the hubs were strategically placed to be connected to the transit hubs, again, recognizing the important role that transit serves in helping people get around within the neighborhood and also to invite people from other parts of Portland to enjoy the neighborhood amenities as well. So this is, you received the expedited version of this, but I hope it was enough to show you what happens when we really step back and create forums for people to engage in questions of not just one particular policy area, but to really think about how their lives and the lives of their community members can be served when we think about transportation in particular being a mechanism for healing and connecting us. And as an area in which we can all benefit from the progress and the growth that it's otherwise associated with. And then, well, so I will wrap it up there so that we can get to questions, but a lot more to share, so thank you.
Thank you so much, both Michael and Winta. Thank you so much. We are so lucky. Like I said in the chat, we're so lucky, so honored to have you here, to be in your presence and to learn so much from you. Like I said, from the the title of this class, so much of it is, this vision for the future, but so important is that we honor our past. We do have a few questions. I see a hand up. Let me take a few questions just as a content question for Winta or Michael. Joan, I see your hand up. So.
I firstly just want to say thanks to you both for the work that you're doing. I'm a big fan, and it's amazing to see this kind of vision that it seems, honoring the past, but it also seems like the kind of thing I wish Portland were trying to do for all of our neighborhoods right now. And but the question that I have for you is so ODOT, right, is an important partner, and ODOT is the reason, well, not the only reason, but how is it to be needing to work with a partner or a agency who's essentially the one who inflicted much of this harm, I guess, and who maybe doesn't have the best trust with much of the public right now? And I think I'm sure you understand my question and what I'm getting at.
Winta, I'll start, and then I'll let you close. First of all, and again, allow me just a little bit of liberty and sort of offering a philosophy. I remember a discussion that I heard with former President Obama, who was reacting to what had been just an outcry of people sort of challenging folks who were woke, who had just kind of come to understand something very deeply. And there was a level of suspicion associated with it. And his response was, remarkable things can be done by flawed people. I'm from the African-American community. Lyndon Johnson advanced civil rights more than JFK. And obviously his foundation, his belief, started in a very different place. I ran a corporate foundation at Aetna, the insurance company, back in the mid-90s. In my first year, I found out that as a foundation and as an insurance company, we sold policies to slave owners. So, there are times when you find yourself in a space representing something that history comes with it, because we will not rewrite history. The opportunity in working with ODOT is to create new history. And there's a tension there, without a doubt. But I also know that it's a big house. There are lots of rooms in it, and there are lots of perspectives within it. And our advocacy is designed to heighten and to amplify the perspective of those who are much more progressive in their thinking about what this opportunity can hold. Now, whether or not that'll prevail, we don't know. But I know at the end of the day, there has to be some degree of acknowledgement and alignment that this is an opportunity that they will have only now, and that in looking back on it in decades to come, how this decision is made is going to be just as indicative of how the decisions were made 50 years ago when this community was destroyed. So Winta, I'll step back from that because, I'll step back from that.
Yeah, I'll just add briefly, every team has to have diplomats and it's got to have its street fighters. And the key is knowing when to deploy who and for what purpose. So, that's one of the one of the challenges of our work is that actually many of the, right now we're talking about ODOT, but the city made a number of decisions that have led to this as well. So, and so did the federal government. And so it goes on. And it's why it is critical that AVT be organized as an independent entity to be able to collaborate, push forward a positive vision, and then when necessary, push back and set parameters again towards the goal of constructive movement towards this vision. But it's not without its challenges for sure.
Any other questions for Winta and Michael? I know, Michael, you're going to hop off after this presentation, so I really wanted to be in the space with you, and again, be thankful for what you're doing, what you have been continuing to do for our city, and being on the board and speak as eloquently as you do at so many places. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having us. Thank you for having me. And I do want to just take a moment, because I know Robin is with us, and she has the opportunity or the responsibility of sort of representing multiple interests. I tell people all the time, I have two brothers who I love deeply. One's a year younger, the other is like 10 years older. And if you came in my house when we grew up and asked us the same question, you got 3 different answers. But we all loved our family. We all supported each other. And at times we came to the same place, but at different paces and in different ways. So I don't want this to be an indictment that is viewed as sort of just spreading to all who are associated. As I said, somebody who ran a foundation and had to find grace in a space where, you know, we were selling life insurance to slave owners. I understand that sometimes the opportunity for us is to continue to raise visibility and awareness and be able to be in other rooms that allows us to sort of hear and be heard at the same time. So I'm delighted you're here with us, and I hope that this hasn't been uncomfortable.
Thank you, Michael and Winta, and very much thank you, Robin, for being here. You are my friend and you're my colleague, first and foremost. And for most of my my career, my clients know that I'm not afraid to bring people together. I bridge that gap in so many of my work, and it's so important to bring people together. And this is not supposed to be a controversial. Robin works for ODOT, but she's not on the I-5 Rose Quarter project. So I purposely did that as well. So I want Robin to be here in this space with Albina Vision, really to share what she's doing at a statewide level. Robin and I, as I had shared, had spanned our career kind of parallel to some degree, but just recently this year, not even a year ago, this year we worked on a project together, and it's to do equity community engagement for Region 1, and looking at our STIP, prioritizing our STIP and interviewing a lot of community members. So I want to bring Robin to this class to share with you that ODOT's not the bad guy, really not. There are really great people that work for ODOT. And, but I will leave it at that. Robin, I'm gonna hand it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Tweed. Let me get myself situated. So yes, thanks, Tweed. I am Robin. I am not ODOT. I appreciated the comments about the initial question there about, I'm a big fan of your work. Thank you for your work. These are things nobody tells people who work for ODOT. So yeah, a little bit about me. Who the heck am I? Why am I here? I use she, her pronouns. At the heart of the matter, I am just a person who cares very much about the work that I do, and I am a street level bureaucrat. So I am not, I am not anybody high powered in ODOT or in the state or any kind of government sector. I've got up here kind of 3 bullet points that really hit home with me. So first and foremost, I'm a parent. I've a single car family. We lived in Portland for 18 years, live in the Piedmont neighborhood. We walk and bike most places we go. And last Friday night, I live on an ODOT managed roadway. So you can put 2 and 2 together about where I live if you want to come by and say hi. But a drunk driver hit the telephone pole in front of our house last Friday. And if that pole hadn't been there, they would have been in our bedroom. So the work that I do right now is definitely very personal. I was a student of this class in 2006, 2007. There's a similar class that I don't even know if it still happens anymore, but it's another community class that's around development in Portland that I also took around the same time, which gave me a lot of context for the city that I moved to in about 2005. My project when I took the class was redesigning the intersection at Broadway and North Williams. There used to be a double right turn that crossed a bike lane there that had, like I said, literally been a deadly intersection. It doesn't look quite that way anymore. I worked for a consulting firm, transportation consulting firm called Alta. It used to be called Alta Planning and Design, and did active transportation and recreation projects across the country for nearly 9 years. I think one of the formative projects that I had an opportunity to work on was the North Williams Bikeway project, which was a PBOT project that started off as being given some very explicit directions about trying to keep the borders on the project of just it's between the curbs and it's just a restriping project. If anybody is familiar with that project, that is not what it is, and that's not how it turned out. But it was a really formative project for me that made me kind of realize that what I really wanted to commit myself to was working kind of longer term, like what happens before the project design starts, what happens before the plan starts, what happens to those plans and designs when they're done. And I really appreciated, Winta, your comment about transportation is never just about transportation, because it's certainly never just about transportation. So I left Alta and joined a local landscape architecture firm, thinking I was leaving transportation behind because it's hard, and I wanted to work in recreation. And ironically, the very first project I ended up working on was how I met Twee. It was a project with Metro closing a gap in the 40-mile loop between Troutdale and Gresham, which happened right around 2016. I think there was some sort of presidential election that happened then that also stirred up a lot of other feelings for people in the community. And that project was abruptly paused. But I also worked on a Washington Park master plan that project is funded by Explore Washington Park, the Transportation Management Association for the area. So I wasn't really very successful in leaving transportation behind. But I still had this idea in this goal that I wanted to also work in the public sector and get a different experience. So about in 2017, I went to work for state parks, the Oregon Parks and Recreation Department, was hired as the state trail planner and was working on the Oregon Coast Trail Action Plan. If you're familiar with the Oregon Coast Trail at all, that's a project that just celebrated its 50th anniversary, and it's not done yet. So my sense of time is a little bit skewed. I operate on a different time scale, I think, than some people. But one of the things that I'm also really struck by in my work, leaving transportation and moving into recreation, and again, this sort of came from something Winta said as well, but recreation projects, generally speaking, don't start with the site. They start much bigger, and they start with like, what does the community need? What does the community want? And then it comes back to the recreational element and comes back to the site scale, but transportation projects often don't do that. And so that's kind of something that's always front of mind for me. I got plopped back into the ODOT world from state parks, and this is when I met Twee, when I think there's a global pandemic happening, and OPRD's funding was really lottery-based and user fee-based. And so there, I was the planning manager, and then the entire planning department was let go at OPRD. Unfortunately, got picked up by some colleagues that I had met at ODOT. So I'm technically on loan to ODOT. I use that when it gets uncomfortable that this is where I work. I'm like, oh, I don't really work here. I'm just on loan. But yeah, so it was great to reconnect with Twee. We worked on an equitable engagement project in Region 1. And then for the last couple of months, I've been working with the statewide public transportation team, doing some work that is around implementing elements of ODOT's strategic action plan. So I really kind of view myself as somebody that's like, I'm here to take public feedback in whatever form that feedback comes. Sometimes it's a loud voice, sometimes it's a long email, and to really sort of reflect on what's behind the comments or what's build some common understanding there. And then where I can, churn things through a bureaucratic machine, but also making some mental notes about ways we can improve that machine along the way or for the future. and then get something to come out the other side that ultimately serves the needs of the community and the people that had the need in the first place, and asks whether or not we hit that need. I'm also currently a student at Portland State University, so working on a Master's of Public Administration. So I like to think of myself as a highly adaptable person, and I'm also somebody who really values inclusion. So those are kind of the two things that I really lead with. That's a long-winded introduction for myself, and I invite you to just share a little bit about yourself in the chat. I know you all might be familiar with this already, but I'm really curious about, like, what part of town do you live in? Why did you sign up for this class? What do you hope to do with what you learned? So I invite you to share that in the chat. And then I'm going to give you a little bit more context about the question that you were asked. So what does a statewide transportation network that prioritizes the needs of people walking, biking, and taking public transportation look like? So like I said, I'm focused right now on operationalizing a strategic action plan that was adopted by ODOT in 2021. It's only a 3-year time horizon. So this is, if you think of ODOT as a big bureaucratic ship, it was kind of headed one way on the horizon, like with the sight on the horizon. And this action plan just helps shift the horizon line a little bit, but is meant to have some tangible pieces at the end of 2023 that also help demonstrate some measurable progress toward that shift. So in the strategic action plan, you see the quote there on the screen. That's kind of the heart of the plan. There's 3 priorities in there: equity, the modern transportation system, and then sufficient and reliable funding. So needing to be able to do all of those 3 things together. There's goals that go with those, but then there are 10 strategic outcomes that are really how we can measure success against this. So the one that I'm focused on, and that we're focused on in the Public and Active Transportation Division, is improving equitable access to active and public transportation, which still sounds really broad and nebulous, but there's a metric that's associated with it that says by the end of 2023, we'll increase the percentage of agency funding that's dedicated to projects and programs that improve equitable access to walking, biking, and transit. There's kind of 3 pieces to this. So the first one is defining the baseline. We have to know what we started with to know where we're going. And then the really important thing within that too is how we're going to communicate this change over time. So how are people going to know whether or not we're doing this along the way? And the second piece is around prioritizing improved access for historically excluded communities. We're doing this through a review of our existing programs. Like, a lot of times, public and active transportation kind of get viewed as the equity for the transportation system. And so we've got these programs right now, and we have this, metric for having more funding going towards those programs, but we also recognize that we don't want to keep doing things and keep spending the funding the way that we've always spent the funding. It is also important to make sure that we are considering how we're spending the money and where we're spending the money. And then working with program managers and community members to really identify the places that can have the most direct impact through that work. The third piece is, this is like the heart of the question that you were asked. So defining a statewide priority multimodal network that has at its core equity and safety. And this will become a tool for us to use to prioritize project selection and investments with our internal and external stakeholders. The key thing about this priority multimodal network is this is something that literally a year ago couldn't have even happened. So the active transportation team at ODOT was in the planning division. We had the public transportation team, which mostly focuses on external funding pieces that sat in a different part of the agency. And then we had passenger rail, which was in the rail division, which was in a whole other part of the agency. And now those 3 groups are all together on the same team. So you all went and toured 82nd Avenue. There was also a $10 million investment in other corridors across the state, 3 or 4 of them in the Portland metro region that were rapid pedestrian safety improvement projects. And those projects, even a year ago, like that could not have happened. Like that structure didn't exist at ODOT. The fourth step that's not shown here is just to bring all these things together so that we can operationalize them. And that's where we'll get to by 2023. So what are the tools? And I don't expect you to read all of these, but this is another piece. So ODOT has an assistant director for social equity right now, and has been doing a lot of work over the last couple of years to help build internally, like our internal capacity to think about transportation and think about things differently. So we are also internally changing people's mental models for how this big institution works, and actually physically, having to interrupt big institutional bias. Through the process, we hope to also be like forming and strengthening relationships, and also consistently asking ourselves, like, why are we doing this instead of that? Like, and really understanding the why behind the work we do. I also really want to highlight, like, the very first question is the first question on purpose. Like, how have or will historically excluded communities been informed, consulted, or involved as part of the process? And how do we do that? Like, you literally can't answer the second bullet point if you don't stop and recognize, like, if you haven't talked with the community, then you can't answer the second bullet point about how these projects or programs are going to benefit or burden that community. So I think it's just a good internal awareness tool for us as we work through our own processes. So now to the question. So what does a statewide transportation network that prioritizes the needs of people walking, biking, and taking public transportation look like? That's a big question. That's a big ask. I know when I started this work, one of the things that I imagined, especially having just come off of working on the Oregon Coast Trail, was like, my picture of my road in front of my house is a very like personal place, and a very like, I have a very personal experience with that road and what I need from that street, or what I need to get across that street to get my kid to school so that I can cross the other busy street that I have to cross to get to school. And I don't, frankly, as a person, care how that fits into the statewide network. Like, is this really a network for people to be able to walk from one end of the state to the other, like the Oregon Coast Trail? Or is this more integrated network that is intended to like make sure that somebody can get from their front door to a bus and make a connection that way? Or, what is the intent behind this? So this is something that I've been grappling with for a couple of months. So thanks for helping me think about it in a little bit different area. And I have some of the comments on the next couple of slides that you all put up there, and then I'll wrap up so we can get to the Q&A part of the show. So one of the things I mentioned, like, I'm currently in the public administration program at Portland State University. I'm like a couple of semesters into it. One of the really pointed lessons I learned after studying a lot of the history that I didn't learn about civics in school was that if it's hard, that's because it was designed to be hard. Like, things happen slowly. It's really important for us. Like, I really appreciated Michael saying, like, this uninhibited belief, like, this is a long game. But along the way, we got to find those little victories and things to celebrate along the way. So that's something that, like, I think for some people, if you go learn about public administration and you're like, oh, geez, I just want to like fix the world right now. It's really hard to hear that, like, no, it's hard and it's slow. And the fact that it is hard and slow, like, that also like has saved our bacon a couple times too. And then the other thing that kind of came to mind, I don't know like kind of your reasons or rationale for taking this class or what you hope to be part of, but yesterday there were a couple of presentations that took place to the Joint Commission on Transportation. And one of those was an ODOT presentation, but the other was a group of folks, the Clean and Just Transportation Network. If you're not familiar with the work they're doing, I encourage you to kind of think about the work that they're doing a little bit more, because they're really focused in on the fact that like transportation is just about the access to an opportunity. A couple of things from their presentation were that a third of people in Oregon don't even have access to a vehicle. People who live in rural parts of our state are driving farther than they needed to drive in the past just to access basic services that they need. And then one thing that I thought was really interesting, I think Mexico has a policy now in place, and they're doing their work a little bit differently. So focusing on making sure that everybody is getting their basic needs first, and having clearly stated that value, I think is a really important part of the work that the folks from the Clean and Just Transportation Network were highlighting yesterday.
Can I say something, Robin, really quickly? I'm so glad you brought that up, because I actually helped that committee form way back when. It wasn't even, it was in the middle of the pandemic. I haven't worked with them, but it was with, it was with OEC and Opal and Verde and Victoria, V. Placar. And they actually came to speak to this course last year.
Oh, cool. Yeah. So they did a great presentation yesterday. And one of the pieces, when the recording is available, or if you all have a chance to connect and learn more about the work they're doing, it was really striking to me, because it's like, you kind of got to know the rules before you can break the rules, but you also have to not get sucked into the system and spit out while you're at it. And their presentation really homed in, like they were utilizing ODOT's statewide transportation strategy as sort of the framework behind some of the stuff that they're asking, which was really smart. So as an advocate, anytime you can really take the time to educate yourself, that's a great thing to do. There's a couple other pieces, like currently the Oregon's state transportation rule is under update. So that's land use rule that can potentially and may impact a lot of the ways that our transportation work across the state is happening. And it does include, it's being done in the name of climate change. So then there's a couple of the Oregon transportation plan is also currently being updated, and that work is underway. And then just sort of as an advocate, so part of what I used to do when I worked at Alto was do these training sessions where we would put advocates and engineers in the room together to learn about some resources. And at the time, the NACTO Urban Bikeway Design Guide was a brand new tool, and a lot of the facilities and things in it were experimental. But there's a whole host of resources that NACTO has available, all public open source resources about everything from access to transit, urban kind of pedestrian and bicycle facilities. There's also the federal FHWA has a small town and rural multimodal network design guide. So if this is work that you're interested in doing, again, like there are resources available so you can understand some of the guidelines and some of the parameters that we're operating in. Yeah, but that's it. I just wanted to kind of put some of those things out there, and I can, if you don't have links to them, Twee, I can certainly make sure that folks have access to that. But I'll stop there so we can.
Great, thank you. That was a little bit a flashback for me just a year ago, but the Clean and Just Transportation Network was a really great, started as a very great group to try to make our system cleaner. So, okay, so we have about 10 minutes before we go to break. I'd like to entertain us with some questions. You have some questions for Robin. I see Hami has his hand up, so I'm gonna pick on you, Hami.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for the presentations. I appreciate your time and being here. My name's Hami. So sorry about my cat's tail. So, I think a lot of us, or at least some of us, really feel that in the time of climate crisis and climate chaos, maybe we don't have 50 years left. The scientists are telling us that, in the next 5 to 10 years, there's going to be a tipping point. So how do we get things done with an eye to the community and ears to the community and understanding what is the right thing to do from the equity perspective, but also having the urgency that we need to have with regard to the massive climate issue that we're suffering from, and more of us are going to be suffering from in the near future.
I'm guessing that's a question for me, or maybe just more broadly. So
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Yeah, I would say it's for anyone who wants to answer it. I think the Albina Vision Trust also, honestly. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Hami. And if you're not familiar with it already, there's a term called wicked problems. Like the climate crisis is definitely a wicked problem. Like it's too big for any one of us or any individual agency to solve alone. But
I'll and again, I think Winta described me as the social worker in all of this technical discussion. So I come at it with a somewhat different lens. I agree that we don't have the luxury of looking at this over the span of 50 years. And I think in some ways, that's provided a significant portion of some of the, what I would call conflictual counterbalance that we're facing at AVT, because even though we're looking at this long-term vision, there are things that if we do not get in front of today, preclude us from ever considering that long-term vision. I mean, we've got to make sure that no harm is done so that we have the opportunity to continue to give ourselves the ability to think beyond some of the constraints of today. The environmental impacts on Harriet Tubman School is not something that we can look at over the next 10 to 15 years. If we go forward with the infrastructure development that's proposed today, there's no retrofitting that in a decade to have it address the concerns of last year, let alone tomorrow. So I think we're trying to figure out what are the things, and Winta use this sort of concept, we want to come to this as fellow travelers, enlightened participants, but we also come to it as a SWAT team. And there are things that are non-negotiable. There are positions that people are going to have to find their way into that space in a constructive way. And one of the challenges that we have had, quite frankly, one of the challenges that we have had, again, with ODOT is that they have, what I say, started the story in the middle, not the beginning, not looking at the decisions that were made over time that we now have to find ourselves struggling with. And we can't begin it by sort of looking at what are the things that we can now do on a short term that obviate the fact that we have made decisions that now have to be reversed. Systemically, they have got to be looked at in terms of policies that were not designed to address the concerns that we face today and tomorrow. And peeling some of that back is muddy, it is uncomfortable, and it is expensive. And I think we find ourselves in that space, but I agree with you. We would be doing a disservice to simply believe that at some point, 20 or 30 years from now, we're going to be facing the problem in its current dimensions, because it is not standing still, nor can we. But I think a part of our concern is to look at those issues where we frankly have said, this is a non-starter, because should this go forward, we can pack up our bags and go home, because all of what we're talking about is going to be impossible to achieve.
Yeah, and I would add to that, we have to shake this notion that equity and climate are somehow at odds with one another. There is great urgency in both, and they are inextricably tied. So if you talk to the Albina community, members, especially who were impacted by the forced displacement, that impact is cumulative generation to generation. So there is great urgency in addressing that directly and quickly. And when we look at what exists in the neighborhood, I mean, we have taken the birthplace of the city's tree planting programs and replaced it with large parking lots. We have homes and small businesses now replaced by parking garages. So, you know, when you look at the current state of the neighborhood, it doesn't meet any kind of acceptable 21st century environmental standard. And with that comes a lot of opportunity to act urgently. So we are always balancing the need to say this is a 50, 100, 500-year plan, because it's important to say that Black people will be here in the future, given all that has happened. And to make sure that we're driven, as Mike said, but what's possible instead of what's immediately in front of us. At the same time, there's great urgency to all of this, and you'll see that reflected in our efforts to implement this.
Thank you for the question, Hami, and great answers. I think everything's holistic in the planning that we do. So very important. I wonder if we should ask one more question and then go to break, or we could break now and return back for the Q&A, more of the Q&A. I want to give you the option. We have about 3 minutes prior. So why don't we break? Why don't we break for 10 minutes and come back at 7:58? Give us a little break from the presentation, stretch our legs. I just want to thank you again, Robin. Thank you for sharing your work. Thank you for being here, Michael, and thank you so much, Winta, for being here. But let's break and we'll come back. See you in 10 minutes.
Suppression. Congress has to pass federal legislation protecting
minutes left of this year's class. I feel like I'm at some auction. I want to bring us back, but also bring us back to the core of this class before we resume our Q&A with our guest speakers. I see that Michael has dropped off. I want to remind you when this course started back 31 years ago, and the intent of this course was to take it outside of the City of Portland City Hall and put it into the academic of PSU. And the reason why that was done so was that we didn't have to create, there was no controversy, and that it was not on the territory of City Hall, the City of Portland, folks within PBOT or in PBOT territory. And really, when Earl started this class, it was an opportunity to have students learn about transportation and then be that advocate for their system. So I just want to bring us back as we close this class, and especially as we have our guest speakers here, that I'd like to maintain a really good tone and a respect for our guest speakers. Transportation is hard to work on. I can never pull myself out of transportation. And I wouldn't even try, because I know how much it touches everyone's lives in so many levels, so many ways. And returning back to this course, and also the impetus for this course when I took it over 3 years ago, was to create a more equitable system for folks in this space, and also conversations and dialogue. And I think we're lucky enough to be alive in this time and space where we could share and unearth a lot of issues that's happening, and then come and bring together and be as collaborative as possible. So I want us to remember that as we launch into this Q&A together. And I want us to recognize that this is a hard space to be. Like Michael said in the chat before he left, hard work is just hard. So I just want to bring that back to why we're here, what we're doing, and I have our speakers, our guest speakers here. So with that, I'd like to open back the floor for more questions as we have our who have Winta and Robin with us tonight. So I know there's some questions in the chat, but I actually think it would be good to take this live. So either that, or we could share our projects. Which is coming up pretty soon as we close our course. So, Sean.
I've had a question in my mind about these caps on I-5.
Oh, you're, take yourself off mute.
Oh.
Can't hear you.
Are you there? Oh, maybe my...
We can hear you.
Oh, can you hear me? Okay.
We still can't hear you, Sean. Do you want to type your question in the chat?
We can hear him.
Now, if we're having a hard time.
We can hear him.
We can hear him.
What's going on?
1, 2, 3. Can you hear me? Okay.
Maybe her volume is down.
I'll continue with my question.
Oh my God, I think I muted you guys. Never mind. I shut. Okay, go on.
A question that's been in my mind about these caps on I-5 is that obviously a physical barrier is going to keep emissions from I-5 from that spot, right? But won't it just concentrate the emissions at the end of the tunnel? Won't they just be greater at those points? That's what I've been wondering about.
So I can't answer that the way an engineer would. I'll start with that caveat. But say that, you know, this is a part of the work that we wanted that independent cover team that presented the design options to look into. And so my understanding is that there's a ventilation solution so that you're not spewing out emissions, and that, you know, the caps in the way that we're proposing are new here, but there are lots of examples all over the country. And so the, you know, design challenge until now has really been about, is this possible? And can we, you know, change the project to accommodate this bigger vision? That technical work will continue over the next year. So sorry that that's not a super great answer, other than to say, there is a technical solution to that.
No, that's good. I'm glad to hear that at least it's been brought up. So that's good. Thank you.
Kathy.
Hi, this is a question to ODOT in particular, because you are working on active transportation projects, Robin, and you also have the experience of having worked for Alta. So you have a lot of experience in the whole kind of active transportation, or not just active transportation, but getting people around by walking and biking and taking transit. And I'm just wondering, from your perspective within the agency, you know, how dedicated people are in the agency of ODOT to making that kind of their core mission. I don't know. I mean, I don't see it from the inside as much as I do from PBOT. I mean, at least PBOT has, you know, the goal that they want to have, you know, only 30% of people getting around by car in 10 years from now. Is that true at ODOT too?
It's a little bit different. Like, if I could put on my public administration hat for a second, like there's statute and there's federal law that kind of defines the structure of what the focus of ODOT is. So that's the system that we have to operate within. But I can definitely without a doubt say, I mean, yes, there are individuals here who care very much about it. There's also at an institutional level a recognition of the importance and how it threads through things. It's complicated. I mean, that is part of, you know, it is a big ship. It's not a thing we can turn on a dime. And so that is part of like the work that's being done throughout the agency at different levels, like on a long-term planning scale or at an immediate kind of project, like the pedestrian rapid response projects, is like asking questions about like, but what can we do right now in this space within the resources that we have? So,
I mean, I guess one of the things, I'm much more familiar with Washington State, where I came from. And the thing that surprised me about WashDOT is that, you know, there were only, you know, in an immense department, you know, 10,000 staff or something like that, there were only about 10 people assigned to pedestrian bike infrastructure. What's the number in ODOT?
Yeah, so it would be a little bit more difficult to define right now within ODOT. There's some people that it's part of their job. I think it's a little bit more distributed than 10 people. But if you think about it like a team of cohorts, it's definitely a smaller number of people that have that dedicated focus in their job description than PBOT.
And that's for doing statewide planning too.
That's for doing statewide, but then the way ODOT works in public transportation is a very different sphere, right? So there's a fair amount of federal funding that comes to our state through federal transit money, but ODOT isn't actually a transit provider in any sense of the word. So some of that goes directly to transit agencies, and some of it is administered by ODOT, but it's like our ability to specifically do anything is more in a realm of influence.
I mean, one of the things, I was on a talk yesterday actually with a group called America Walks. We were trying to think about kind of long-term future of the organization. And, you know, what we see is this enormous tidal wave of money coming from the federal government, and the shovel-ready projects that state agencies have are highway projects. So how can we shift that into more practical things for people?
Yeah, that's very much the intention of developing the priority multimodal network, is to get away from a place where it's just the highway projects that are ready to go and everything else seems hard. It's to have, by the end of this next couple of years, to have dedicated corridors where we have identified like these are the important corridors and these are the potential solutions that we can do with the tools that we have and the funding we have to do that work. And then I do think too, through the exercise that happened with the pedestrian rapid response work, there's also been a high number of things that were identified, even just on a maintenance level. Like these aren't things that are going to get stuck in the churn of bureaucracy. These are like places where we can give some very intentional maintenance needs and help folks who work at the maintenance level. Like these aren't people who necessarily directly work with constituents all the time. So they don't always understand the importance of maybe prioritizing trimming hedges or trees in a certain location because it's a key part of the safe routes to school network for an elementary school. But that is also our job internally, is to help work with our staff and understand like how we all have a role to play in this and what that role is.
Great, thanks, Robin. Thank you, Kathy, for the question. Hendrik, you're up next.
Hi, this question's for Winta. The AVT is a big idea, and big ideas are really exciting. And I see a lot of connections between Portland's vision for its future, like equity, mixed income housing, living locally, developing smart, and using public transportation. I'm curious if you can share with us what current organizations and or opportunities you see blossoming or, you know, bearing some kind of fruit within the next 10 years that connects with the AVT vision.
Yeah, that's a great question. But let me ask you a clarifying question. What do you mean by organization? Like within the Albina vision, what do I see blossoming in the next?
Sorry, like more like relationships with other organizations around the city.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, relationships are the very basis of our work, especially when you have a really place-based vision. You know, our role is to act as convener in many instances, to bring together the partners. So it's, I think, the greatest challenge in the implementation of a vision like this is that you need collaboration and coordination between all levels of government across multiple agencies. And you need them to be passionate and aligned on bringing this vision forward. And then you need to have that same level of coordination with private sector and community groups as well. So it's the basis of a lot of the work we've done. I would say, you know, our partnerships in the transportation space, for example, have really come through our advocacy around the I-5 project. And so, you know, we're developing relationships in that way. One of the core sort of organizing principles is that we plan to plan around the life of children, and specifically Black and Brown children. And so through that, we partner with a number of community organizations that serve children, as well as Portland Public Schools. So it really, you know, in a really expansive vision like this, there are all kinds of partnerships. So maybe to illustrate the way that we go from a high level vision to practical sort of implementation, I can tell you about our very first development project in the district, which came through with a partnership with the property owner who said, I have a parking lot and I want this to be more than a parking lot. And I am inspired by what I've seen and want to talk about how to move it forward. This is Betsy Reese and her husband, Rich Reese. So then we brought on a development group with tons of expertise, which was Edlin and Company, and said, we want to grow our capacity as developers. Could this be a joint partnership? And they enthusiastically said yes. And then we brought on POIC Rosemary Anderson High School, which provides programming just on the other side of I-5, and said, you know, a long-term objective of a vision like this has to be to anchor existing organizations and make sure that, you know, community members are able to receive services close to these anchor organizations. And so would you come on as our partner to provide resident services and ongoing programming so we can start bringing programming to the district? And in the actual construction, how do we have a design team that reflects Black architects, a Black construction firm, and benefits today that start generating wealth? So it was this whirlwind of partnerships, and it's a microcosm of, you know, what the sort of level of coordination it will take at a district. So now the big challenge is to say, in this, you know, 94 acres, it's a big to-do list. So what is phase one? What are the really critical partnerships and commitments that we need that don't foreclose on any future opportunities, and move forward to that? So it's a long answer, but the point is it's ongoing and it's constant. And one of the reasons that I love groups like this is that, you know, it's a recruitment on my part to say, we need you too. And so I hope you can see where you fit in a vision like that, because there's plenty of room and need. And let me just, one last note, you know, recently we've been talking about like, what is the opportunity when you're planning a community from this stage? And so in the context of the climate crisis, what does it mean to create a, you know, Portland's first net carbon zero community? And can we start dreaming and thinking about that? But again, in each of these instances, our success depends on our ability to collaborate. And so I hope that you see the value of a long-term vision, but don't sort of sit back and say that's in the future. It's actually right now, and it's, always time to take the next step.
Thank you.
Hey, Winta. How are you doing? Good evening. Thank you so much for talking. Great job. I always enjoy listening to you. Hey, here's a tactical question. So that grain elevator is like an eyesore in such a beautiful program that I can't wait to see move forward. And it's along the river. When can we get that into your bucket of dream items?
Oh, that is a great question. And, it's been so fun looking at what's happened in other places. Those grain elevators have been turned into art, museums and hotels and all sorts of things. So we've put that to our design team and expect to see what they come up with in the next 2 weeks. And so, Keith, I will send it to you and hope for your feedback on that.
Wouldn't that be cool? Do you have that? Is that your structure in the project then?
Yes.
Oh, that's great. That's going to be a lot of fun.
It
Great.
is. Is that the Dreyfus grain elevator? Well, good luck. I thought Paul Allen tried to buy that elevator, and Dreyfus would never sell, ever.
Every parcel comes with its own story.
Joan, you're up next.
Yeah, if others have questions, I don't want to take up too much time. I also want to be clear to Robin that I did not mean any disrespect to you as somebody who works for ODOT. Like I have friends at ODOT. I don't think I'm not trying to demonize everybody. I think we can sort of hold institutions responsible and be clear that that doesn't mean that I think, Robin is herself like destroying the climate or something. So, but I guess, so Winta, I have a question. So I live in Elliott and I'm very much supportive of the work that you all are doing. And one of my kids went to Tubman and I'm, been working with Aaron Brown. And, but one of my big fears is that in moving forward in this project that, and I don't know if this is realistic or just, I have this idea that like ODOT will expand the freeway and then be like, oh, we ran out of money for anything but those caps that were just gonna like hold construction equipment. And also, we don't really want to move a middle school. That's not our job. And so I guess what I'm wondering is how you move forward, sort of like, because it is a lot of extra money to do. I mean, I would rather they just skip the freeway expansion part and do the caps, but that's obviously not up to me or you. So I guess, how do you sort of, just even like, how do you get this stuff in writing? Do you get like a memo, or is it just that you hope that you're applying enough political power? Obviously you all have the governor's ear. Do you just have to, yeah.
Yeah, it's a good question. And I would say that, it was really important for us to always be advocating for what we want as opposed to what we don't want. And in that way, have been really proud of the way that local government partners have really stepped up to say, this is totally possible. And it's actually within their responsibility to make sure that there's accountability. So, the next phase for those who have been tracking really closely is that, once the governor said this hybrid 3 option that I presented is the one that moves forward and it was blessed by the OTC, the immediate next step is not for everybody to come back and, pretend that everything's okay. It's really to say, this is progress and we will recognize it as such. And we need the appropriate intergovernment agreements and accountability structures so that we can move forward in good faith. And so that's what's being developed now. And really, you know, I view it as much the community's responsibility, including community organizations, as it is the government partners who have tools that, you know, can ensure that. And the city in particular, the city, metro, and the county have all been strong in saying we won't accept a whoops at the end because the opportunity is too great and the resources are there with the federal, especially the federal commitments that have been made to rectify exactly these kinds of mistakes that have been made. So from, you know, where I sit, it's been a really messy sort of road here at times, and we can't afford to be discouraged and disengaged. We have to focus on, you know, making sure there are the tools to move forward. So that's where I put my faith. It's not in the hopes, but that the city especially will exercise its permitting authority to make sure we get the outcomes that have been promised.
Thank you.
I see Sam's hand up. I think this is going to be the last question for tonight.
All right. Well, I live on Hayden Island, and of course, we're concerned about what's going to happen with I-5. And I live in the low-income area. You know, a lot of people think of Hayden Island as a bunch of rich people. There are a bunch of poor people too in the mobile home park, which has like 500 mobile homes, of which I am one. I don't understand why we have just 3 choices when there are, you know, Musk is offering in Fort Lauderdale and in Las Vegas tunnels, you know, autonomous vehicles, electric powered, no pollution, straight shot. It seems to me that ODOT, and I guess I'm asking you, Robin, or somebody from why ODOT can't consider. I understand why they can't consider that. I mean, that's competition. The transit agencies don't want private competition. I understand that. But our community is being decimated. The mall will be shut down. It will die if there's no access to I-5. This is a Robert Moses sort of act, and I just can't accept it. I think there's it's not going to stand the test of time. I don't understand why ODOT can't open up for more options. Can anybody help me with this? Because it's our
Sam,
life and death.
Yeah, Sam, can I offer something? It's not just ODOT. I think it's everyone. I think it's really just everybody. But I think this is a really great case study for next year's class. I'd love for some students to like dive deeper into it. A climate change, sustainability, electric vehicles, cars, all of this is real estate, right? At the end of the day, it's real estate competing with one another. So it's a collaborative effort from both states. I know exactly where you're at. And there's quite a bit of talk right now with the I-5 trade corridor, the CRC, which is now the Interstate Bridge Project. And you're right in the thick of all of that, on all of that change. And I know in these conversations we've had over the years or even today, really is that we don't have time. We really don't. And for so many reasons we don't, because we are pushing against the clock for all that has happened. And we're doing the best we can in so many ways. I think states and cities and all the organizations, private organizations are coming together. But you're posing a $64 million question. It's really hard to answer. I don't know. Do you want to wager anything? This is the last question of the night, of the class.
I guess I do want to, since you're all students in the class, like I do want to put this out there that anytime you catch yourself saying, why don't we just like do something. Like there isn't there. That's a really complicated. Why don't we just like that's a big complicated question. The I-5 corridor, like the pinch point between the Rose Quarter and the Interstate Bridge that's the biggest pinch point on the West Coast for the transportation network, but it's also in your backyard, and it's in Winta's neighborhood, like it's in Jones' neighborhood. Like, so there is some good in the why don't we just, like the fact that we aren't just able to act on those quick solutions that seem like they could be a good idea. Sometimes is actually a good idea and a good thing.
Full disclosure for the class, I'm actually on the Interstate Bridge project as a consultant.
They've spent so much money on marketing and advertising already. It's been like $1 million in those terrible TikToks. It's horrible. I know you're not out there making them.
That's what Twee's doing. Twee's making the TikToks on the Interstate Bridge.
I would watch them.
Right?
I would like those TikToks.
This project came back to me 20 years later. This was my very first project out of college. Was the I-5 trade corridor, then became CRC. I worked for David Evans and Associates at that time and did traffic analysis for them. Fast forward to where we are now, I'm again back on the project, which is the Interstate Bridge project. But no, I'm not making the millions off of TikTok. And I just realized like TikTok has been a thing. It's like a bigger thing than Facebook or Instagram these days. So maybe I need to hop on that. So I want to close this class with a round of applause for our guest speakers. They've been wonderful. Thank you so much for being here. It's been an evening. Thank you so much for sharing time with us, Winta and Robin. I'm not sure if you two will cross paths again, but this is a big class and a big deal for all of us to come together and talk about really the hard questions. I think that's why we're here. That's why this class is here. And again, I want to help lead our students towards a better future in so many ways. So we have 10 more minutes of class. Robin and Winta, you're welcome. You're good to leave if you like, but if there's any other closing thoughts I'd like for you to share for the class. One of the things I was talking to Winta about is that if I'm going to teach the class again next year, I'd love to do a field trip at the Harriet Tubman School. I think that would be wonderful. I think it's much necessary for students to be in that space and to be there and walk it, to know. So I'm gonna leave the room open for another 10 minutes for conversations, questions, feedback, comments. We're off Thanksgiving week, the holiday week. So wish you all a very safe time off. It's gonna be hard. I don't know what the weather's gonna be like, but it's gonna just be darker. And spend your time with your loved ones. Don't forget your projects. Don't forget the scavenger hunt bingo game. There's a reward that comes with it when you do a blackout. So there's going to be a gift coming from PBOT. And don't forget your projects. So we got to follow up with your projects, and we're going to do a certificate and graduation and everything. Well, you're kind of at graduation at the project. So Kathy, I see your hand is up. I'll take your question or your comment.
Sure, I am kind of curious about the project. So, we've all been working on things. We're each given 3 minutes or 5 minutes to present on a Zoom screen. Anything else we should know about it?
I will be inviting our guest speakers who have been here to attend. And usually there's usually one or two that attend the the presentation. I know for sure our Commissioner Johannes Hardesty will attend one of the nights, and she'll get feedback for your project. She does a really good job of it. She came last year before she was Transportation Commissioner. She will be here. I don't remember, I have to look at the calendar again, either week 1 or week 2. And then alternatively, the other week, we will have our Deputy Director of PBOT, who will be here, I think Tara Wesnick. So our deputy will be here to hear your projects and wait for presentations. Yeah, Ananda will follow up with you on the exact title of your presentation, and I'm gonna work up a schedule. Your presentations and your PowerPoint will be due, we just set the date today, will be due to us by the end of day, November 30th. And the first set of presentation will take place December 2nd. And then the second one will be December 9th. So, but everyone's presentations in which you want to present in your projects, however you want to bundle it up and send it to me, everyone's is due on November 30th. Doesn't matter if you're presenting on the 2nd or the 9th. I just want to make sure that everyone gets the same due date for that. And then next week or the week after, I'll roll out the schedule of when you're presenting. I know this class happens every time, there's always attrition, so we lose a lot of students. So hopefully there may be some students that weren't able to attend tonight, but I think we do have a good capacity for the 2 nights, and there'll be a short presentation by our Commissioner Johannes Hardesty, but we will have a good scheduled amount of time for you to present within 3 to 5 minutes. So is there anything else I should add to that? Kathy, do you have any other questions regarding that? Where's Kathy?
No, so
okay.
Everybody should submit in the form of a PowerPoint that should give us about 3 to 5 minutes to present.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
So Tweet, no papers required, just the PowerPoint, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, this project idea is really the intent of when and how you're going to present to City Council. You usually just get 3 minutes. I give you another 2 minutes for Q&A. So however you want to share your story to us is best. You could, I've had students give me a whole notebook of all their research. I'll take that, but I don't really need it. So I just want a presentation. I just want to see what you've been working on.
Okay.
Debbie.
Yeah, I have a question about the essay. We have an essay that we have to write as well, right?
Yes, it's a reflection essay, and I haven't exactly set the due date for that yet, and it's essentially, I think I put that on the Google Doc. I have to go back.
Okay, and then we just email that to you and Ananda.
Yeah, if you can email that to me, Ananda, that would be great.
Okay, yeah, it's that. Okay, and the due date for that, would that also be, would that be later?
Yeah, that would be later. So I'm gonna ask for that. I'm sorry, I haven't, I'm gonna ask for that, no, it's fine. I'm going to ask for that by December 9th.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Anything else? Let me see here. Did everyone do all of their readings?
I meant to. I think so.
You did it?
Did. I meant to. I mean, I think so.
So I wanted to ask you if you would like to do a very informal get together. That was one of the things that came up in the field trip. Jimmy, who is not here right now, he was here earlier. He couldn't make the field trip, and he had asked if we could do like a happy hour of some sort. So I wanted to put that out there. A yay or nay. I'm not sure. Yeah.
I know it's so cold. Could we do something that's not inside? I really wanted to hang out, but I'm not hanging out inside in large groups yet. But if we could find a nice heated place that
find a heated patio somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah. Does somebody want to take that on? I feel like I'm gonna hand that over to someone who wants to plan that. Joan, maybe you want to do find a heated.
What's the timing? When are you thinking it would be? So that would help me find a place. But yeah, okay, I'll do that.
Yeah, let's find a place and we can be in conversation. My intent is, this. I want to invite my first year and my second year and this year. So this contract is really for 3 years, and so I'd love to bring my first year class students together, and then you met some students from last year, and then this cohort. So it's not mandatory, very informal. I wanted to put it out there because it would be a great opportunity for folks to be together. So Joan, if you want to work with me on this, or Ananda, you guys can help me figure out a venue. I don't go out as much anymore, so I have no clue what's out there or what's COVID safe for everyone.
Yeah, we can definitely do that.
Okay, so I'm thinking maybe we could do it right after class is over, like before we head into the holidays. And what I'll do is I'll invite my guest speakers. Winta, Robin, you're also welcome. But I'm thinking maybe a happy hour. First year's class got together almost every class at the end of a Thursday night at the Growler at PSU. So like there's like a community there. And I think they would love to see each other again. And I think they would love to meet you as well. So Keith, you asked for Thursday the 16th. I have no clue what my calendar looks like. Why don't you email me, throw me out some ideas, some dates, and I will let someone else take the lead for that.
We can send out a date survey too. If people want to throw out a couple dates that work for them, and then we'll create a survey and people can kind of weigh in on what day works best for them.
Oh, Hendrik, that's very sweet of you. Please invite this year's class to next year's field trip. It was really cool to chat with last year's class. Yeah, it was fun. I think it was really nice and refreshing to see each other again. It's weird to have lived through this COVID time. I have not seen Winta or Robin. I haven't seen any of my colleagues in so long. Thank you so much again. It's been a pleasure to lead you through this course. It's been a lot of fun. I've learned a lot. I hope you did too. And we're up for finals pretty soon. Thank you.